Hello and welcome back to Politics on the Prairie. I'm your host, Dan Williams, or Spartan D34, depending on where you find me. And today we'll be going over the partisan turnout analysis for State Question 820. So essentially what this is, it is a map of the party turnout for the state question. I have developed a method in which I can track the partisan turnout by precinct in the state of Oklahoma, and that is what is mapped before you by precinct. So here we have on the side here are the overall numbers for the state. As we can see, Republicans made up 341,760 votes, or almost 60.5%. Democrats on 29.5%, Independents under 10%, and Libertarians about a 0.5%. Right? Comparing to the regular state registration numbers, Democrats kind of stayed at the same level they do percentage-wise. Republicans are almost 10% higher than they usually are. Independents are about half about what they usually are, and Libertarians are about half as well. Now let's dive into the map and look at specific areas. Well, starting in the northwest, we can see that, well, it's pretty Republican. That is unsurprising. This area of the state's pretty Republican by registration, so the turnout would be pretty Republican as well. Moving over into this northeast quadrant of the state, again, it's kind of the same story. A lot of Republican areas out here, but there are some Democrat areas. That's around Veneta here in Craig County. Then we have a little pocket of Democratic turnout here in central Stillwater in Langston. Moving on, we'll go to Tulsa here. And here we can sort of see how the city of Tulsa is divided. Maybe not usually, given the big difference in turnout numbers, but we can kind of see the Democratic base of North Tulsa up here, the newly emerging Democratic areas of Riverside, and then some of the Democratic areas out in East Tulsa. But, as we can see with the vaunted Republican turnout, Republicans have, high turnout precincts, high percentage turnout precincts, going all the way almost into central Tulsa, and especially out in the oil-based suburbs of southern Tulsa, south central Tulsa County. So they netted a lot of votes out of here. Again, this was a relatively low turnout affair, but we can really see, the isolation of Democrats in certain areas. Going out into Tahlequah and the Muskogee area, we can see Democrats had solid turnout out here in Muskogee City proper and across Cherokee County, but the weed vote still managed to lose quite handily out here. The next stage of this analysis will be looking at how the weed vote performed relative to the Democratic turnout vote share. I'll get a little bit more technical for part 3, but I wanted to put out this baseline partisan turnout analysis so I could get something out there to not only just tide everybody over, but to kind of introduce the concept of partisan turnout analysis, or PTA as I like to call it. So here we move into the beginnings of Little Dixie and Little Dixie proper, where you can see Democrats have a higher turnout in this area relative to Republicans than what you would expect. Again, I'd like to caution that even though you see a lot of blue precincts in this area, especially in McIntosh County, a lot of these folks, while they may be registered Democratic, don't vote Democrat anymore. And part of the thing that played into the weed vote, in my opinion, is the political polarization of it. Whereas other state questions have been fairly even and not been, in my opinion, tainted by the nationalization of our politics, this really, the yes side got associated with Republicans, the no side got associated with Democrats, so we saw the nationalization politics drip through there. Moving down through the Red River region over to Lawton, we can see that Democrats had solid turnout in the Anadarko area, And then it is patchy down here in the Lawton area. Solid precinct, solid Democratic precincts down here, sort of in this area. Generally, where you see a more diverse areas of Lawton, while the wider areas of Lawton are still pretty heavily Republican. And then there's a couple of Democrat precincts out here in far southwestern Oklahoma, in Greer and Harmon counties. But of course, a lot of you will be concerned what happened in the metro area. Well, let's take a look here. Here I have an inset of the blown up region of the metro area. We have Norman down here, more in the middle, south side OKC, east side downtown, and then going up into Edmond. As we can see, core Norman down here, very solid Democratic turnout, at least versus Republican. Whereas Morris forms a solid red brick wall between the cities of Norman and OKC, which is usually the case. We can see if we look over here at Western Oklahoma City, Yukon Mustang, this is all solid red as well. And then going into Oklahoma County, Edmond, solid red. My precinct I see on here is pretty red as well. And we look here into the east side, which is a pretty big blue area of the metro. Downtown is exceedingly blue. South side is a little less blue than what you would expect from normalized election results. And then outside of that, even going into the Hefner corridor, the Nazarene corridor, as we've previously talked about, the blue stops pretty early. Now, why are the results like this, in my opinion? Well, as you can see here, independents, lack of turnout overall in the election, sure. But if we talk about differential lack of turnout, we see that independents didn't turn out as much as they usually, or at least as much as they usually make up of the partisan registration index. They're around 17%. This time they were around 9%. And that seemed to have been directly eaten up by the Republicans, with a higher Republican turnout number versus the Democratic turnout number. We see a lot redder precincts, because I do a direct comparison between just Republicans and Democrats for mapping simplicity's sake. Now, there is some discussion of whether or not I should add independents to the Democrats' turnout, but in my humble opinion, independents in Oklahoma tend to match the partisan lean of the area. So if they're an independent from a conservative area, they'll vote conservatively or with Republicans. Or if they're independent from a progressive or liberal area, they'll vote with Democrats. So it's not always a one-to-one comparison, and might end up making areas look bluer than they actually are. The next set of SQ820 videos will focus on comparing the 820 vote to the partisan turnout, and explaining where the quote unquote wheat vote outperformed Democratic turnout and where it underperformed Democratic turnout. Then looking at some turnout percentage maps, and then finally something I'm going to cover that I've never covered before. I've figured out a way to map age turnout. So I'm going to be breaking up the voter file into demographic chunks, and then mapping who exactly turned out in what precinct age-wise. Whether that be, Generation Z, Millennials, Baby Boomers, the Silent Generation. I want to see, there's this thing being passed around, well, it was only old people that turned out to vote, that's why it lost. I'm going to test that to see if that is actually true. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today into this free Patreon video that I'll be sharing. I highly recommend you share this with anybody that you encounter, and encourage people to subscribe. I'd be more than happy to talk with the organizers of either side of this state question to really break into the data about it, as I find this incredibly fascinating. And I will be putting out another video today looking at the 2018 to 2022 Lieutenant Governorship. That will be a paid video, so if you want to catch that one, please subscribe. Again, I'm putting hours and hours of dedication and work into this content, and it can all be yours for the low, low price of $5 a month. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next video. Have a great evening.